Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Little Fella Sports Podcast. As you can see, this is part of our IPL weekly show. Today, we're joined by Krishna, who's obviously a resident guest and has been on our show many times before. And of course, today we've got a special guest from RCB Fan Army. It's one of the official fan groups from Royal Challengers Bangalore. So we've got Prasen from that. So first things first, welcome to the show, Prasen. It's an absolute pleasure having you on.
Thanks a lot, Anirudh, for having me on the show. It's a big rivalry that we're looking forward to. So hoping for some real good banter with you guys here.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And Krishna, as usual, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure having you on.
Yeah, thanks, Anirudh. Welcome, Prasin. Thanks for taking the time out being a part of the podcast today. Yeah.
All right,
Cheers,
guys. Before we get going with the show, talking about tomorrow's game, and all that. First things first, guys. Whoever watching, please do stay safe in these tough times. I hope all of you are safe and good, and things are fine with you. And please do like, share, subscribe to the channel. As you can see, we've crossed 500 subscribers. We hope to continue and build on this, and I hope you really enjoy our content. So going into the show. So first things first, Present. 4 games, 4 wins. Something RCB have never done before. What do you make? Did you expect this kind of positive, incredible, dominant start from RCB? I mean, what are your initial thoughts on the first 4 games from an RCB perspective?
Yeah, well, what I've understood from Kohli's thinking all these years is he hates the word complacency, and I think he must have used it more than 100 times over the course of the last 13 years. But yeah, I think, look, complacency is obviously bound to creep in for any of us. I still wake up every single day, pinch myself to think if this is true, because obviously we haven't had this luxury of winning the first 4 matches ever in the history of the IPL. But of course, it's a fantastic feeling, and I think everything stems from the fact that we had a great auction. Getting Maxwell, I think, was in some sense a very good insurance for us, because obviously he was going to give that bridge the gap between who was there apart from De Villiers and Virat Kohli. So I think that's a great factor. And of course, Harshal Patel coming to the side as a trade and pulling off pretty much what everyone thinks is out of syllabus. To keep someone like Navdeep Saini out of the 11 and do very well at the death. I think that's an issue that's been sorted out. So overall, I think I'm very happy with the way we have started. That 10-wicket win is probably signs of things to come probably, with that, the way Padikkal and Kohli batted against Rajasthan. So, yeah, very happy overall.
Yeah, as you mentioned, obviously the games against Mumbai and SRH were slightly close. Obviously, against Mumbai in the first game of the tournament, it was purely a De Villiers masterclass from nowhere against someone like Jasprit Bumrah to take him down in that Chepauk wicket. After we've seen what has happened also in the Chepauk wicket. So it was just pure De Villiers masterclass. But after that as well, I mean, SRH was a close game, but a game which RCB deserved to win on the basis of performance. And after that, the 2 wins after that, Kolkata and Rajasthan in the past 1 week, purely, thoroughly dominant performances. The game against Rajasthan from first over itself were not even in the game. RCB, the new ball, Mohammad Siraj going in with the fire, and in the middle overs, the spinners taking on, and towards the end, of course, restricting Rajasthan to a well below par score, because in that 1KD wicket, 178 is not really enough if you want to defend the score, and we saw the way Padikkal and Kohli batted. And in some ways, the innings Padikkal played was not similar to what we'd seen last season. He'd obviously got about 450, 500 runs last season, but most of them was more an accumulation of runs there rather than going out and dominantly playing, because that was something we had not seen before. And from an RCB fan perspective, I'm sure you were delighted to see the way the Padikkal and Kohli played, and it was just complete dominance, right? So moving on to Krishna, CSK, before the start of the season, I think expectations were relatively low after what happened last season. I mean, last season was one of those seasons where first time CSK did not make to the playoffs, and the auction, although you had the mini auction, there was not much you could change in terms of the core team being quite similar to what it was last year. So CSK also, after a very bad defeat in the first game, 3 wins in a row in the last 1 week, dominant wins over both Kolkata and Rajasthan Royals. So what do you make of CSK, and how did you expect such a positive start from CSK as well?
To start off from the auction, I think the approach from the management was different compared to other auctions. Even though the auction that we had before the season was a mini auction, it was great to see that CSK were willing to put in the big bucks to get Maxwell. Unfortunately, we lost out to RCB, and Maxwell at the moment is firing on all cylinders for RCB, so it's good then for them. But I think the approach from the management was good in the auction. We were trying to fill in some spots, and Moeen Ali at that time, you would have probably said, is he the attacking opener that CSK need? Well, that was 50-50. But we know how the CSK management and Dhoni work in tandem. They always want utility players. They never go for these stars and T20 stars as such. But yes, it was a change in approach. They went hard for Maxwell, but we couldn't get it because RCB obviously had a bigger purse. And at that time, I thought the 11 was a little unpredictable because there were too many slots. There were very few slots, and there were too many players. So even at one point, people said maybe Dhoni could even drop Raina because he's not had a lot of professional cricket under his belt at the start of the season. But that first 11, when I saw that first 11, I knew that there would be an intent change from CSK, something that was much needed from what happened in the last season. And from the first match itself was evident. Whoever's coming in, let it be the openers, let it be the middle order players, all of them were looking to looking to play very positively. And of course, the Mumbai track helped them as well. And I think even in the first game, against a Delhi attack that did not have Rabada and Nokia, I think we managed to post 180, 180, 190. I thought that was a decent score, but yes, in Wankhede it's always difficult to defend. And I think the performance from Shikhar Dhawan and Prithvi Shaw during in that game was very deflating. Let's be very honest, because one thing that we knew from the previous season was Chennai's bowling was decent. It was not as bad as previous seasons, but the bowling had definitely improved. But we just got blown away by Delhi Capitals, and for any side that is a deflating start to lose the game like that, even after scoring those many runs and then failing to just do put up a challenge with the ball, that was really deflating. But in all the games that have come after that, we've triggered a collapse. It's either been a top order collapse, or in the Rajasthan Royals, it's been a middle order collapse. The strangle by spin, the Dhoni special strangle by spin that he likes to do. So I think every game we've had a new player stepping up to win the game for us, and every game there's been a different scenario, and the players have come up to it. I think we can draw a lot of parallels between CSK and RCB with respect to the performances this season. RCB have just been a little dominant, and we're seeing the extra 2 points against their name, thanks to that ABD freak show in Chennai. Apart from that, I think there's nothing much that separates these two sides. Both sides have improved from last season, at least on performance and on paper, and we're seeing the results. So I think both teams deserve credit for the kind of performances they've been putting in.
Yeah, I mean, at the start of the season, not many would have expected that this Sunday, I mean, I think match 19 tomorrow, not many would have expected that this would be the top of the table clash. I mean, because many felt that CSK couldn't have improved so much from last season because last season performance was not really that impressive at all. And when it came to RCB, some felt that RCB still had a few holes, but as Prasan also mentioned, someone like Harshal Patel playing ahead of an India player, Navdeep Saini, that was a big surprise at the start of the season, right, Prasan? So what do you make of Harshal Patel's performance? Obviously, he was stayed in from Delhi Capitals. Not many. Many would have expected him to have some sort of role, but the fact that he's arguably a primary death bowler, and so far so good. You can't say how he'll do going forward, but so far in the 4 games he's played, so far he's still done really well. So what do you make of Harshal Patel and how he's done since moving in this season?
Yeah, well, we can't complain, can we? He has the purple cap on his head. That's not an honor that many can claim to have. But look, I mean, to be very honest, he started off on a great note. He also came out in the media and he spoke about how he's changed as a cricketer. Back in 2017-18, he was insulted that people didn't consider him a good enough player. And I think when you get hurled such insults, you transform into a better player. And we saw how he did that for Haryana. It was not just with the ball. He even batted up the order. He scored a lot of runs. So he's basically worked on himself as a complete package and not particularly just with the ball. Of course, he's also a very good hitter, and you can't say he hit the ball very well against Mumbai, but he finished the game, and it takes some amount of composure in the first game to actually hit that, even if it's just one run. So I think, but overall, he's transitioned into a fantastic player, and I think Harshal's biggest advantage is that he has clarity in the role that he's been given at RCB. Because I think for a long time RCB have been looking for that death overs bowler. Harshal Patel, obviously, we all know, he's capable of bowling those slow balls, those cutters. He can mix his pace and slow balls. He can bowl terrific Yorkers. So I think the first game was a massive boost for him to pick up that 5-wicket haul against Mumbai. And since then, he hasn't looked back. Even in the last game, he did get hit for a few runs, but he still picked up wickets and managed to hold on to that purple cap. So I think overall, I'm very pleased with what he's brought to the table. And I think the clarity in role given to him, that he's definitely going to bowl in the second half of the innings and obviously finish off the bowling for RCB is the biggest plus for him, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, that's something RCB have failed to do in previous seasons because you've always had too many changes, players not being given a run. You've had lack of clarity, essentially. I mean, especially under someone like Daniel Vettori, teams kept getting changed auction to auction. game to game. There was just not enough continuity, and some sort of insecurity was basically in there when it came to playing for RCB. And under Mike Hesson, that's definitely changed because it's pretty clear that each one has a defined role. And for example, before the season itself, it was told that Virat and Devdutt will be opening in the batting. And you've got someone like Siraj taking the new ball. Jamison's also a new ball expert. In the middle overs, you've got Washington, Sundar, Chahal, and as you mentioned, towards the second half of the innings, you've got someone like Harshal Patel taking over those death over duties. So in terms of whether it works or not going long term, but it's always, the first step is always to have this particular plan where you have a clear role defined for each of them. So going on to Krishna, CSK have obviously gotten into a role because the last 3 games they won. Coming into the tournament, the first 5 games were considered slightly difficult for CSK because of the way Wankhede is, right? Traditionally, a 200 wicket with CSK's bowling lineup, and arguably the fact that CSK don't have that much firepower, but that's definitely not proven to be the case because CSK have a very long batting lineup that allows someone like Moeen Ali, Raina, all those guys at the top to go very freely and play very positively as well. So, how much of a positive has CSK's batting been for you? Because that's something, as you mentioned, lack of intent was a huge issue last season, and this season that's definitely been overcome in some way by having a very long batting line because you've got someone like Deepak Chahar and Shardul Thakur walking in at 10 and 11. These guys can definitely bat as well. So, in that way, how much of a positive has CSK's batting been?
At the start of the season, when we had the first batting lineup, the initial impression was yes, there's going to be a change in intent, and we're probably going to play a little more positively. The only concern that I had from last season was Sam Curran and Jadeja were able to accelerate through the middle overs and give us good finishes. But whatever they tried, the end score was always being 160 or 170, and that was because Shane Watson and the other opener, I think it was Faf du Plessis, were finding it difficult to get runs in the power play. So the first 6 overs was always a letdown for CSK last season. But this season we started off slowly again. The first 2 power plays, I think the match against Delhi Capitals also it was a poor power play display. I think we managed just 40. But in the last game, I think we got 45 to 50. So we're slowly making that change. It's also good from CSK's point of view that Rutraj Gaikwad has been given the long run. He had 4 poor starts, but then the 5th game, the last game against KKR, he played really well. And even Rutraj Gaikwad was a player who was playing a bit like Padikkal, 120, 130 strike rate, not able to accelerate quickly. He did win 3 Man of the Match awards towards the end of the season, but that was seen as probably something an area to improve on for Rutraj Gaikwad, and he did well in the Wankhede game against KKR. So I think there's been a progressive approach from everyone. Everyone's looking to attack. I think the inclusion of Moeen Ali has to be talked about here. He's come out, he's played freely. He's taken on almost every spinner he's faced so far. From all the 5 teams, he's definitely had an impact in the middle overs, and he's getting the runs for CSK. So I think in that sense, yes, the approach has improved. The shot making has also improved. We're seeing some clear shots. They're trying to hit the gaps, hit the places where the fielders are not there. So all that approach related issues have definitely been covered so far. And I think the challenge for CSK is to now adapt to the different grounds because this is the last game. The game they're going to play against RCB is the last game at Wankhede. Pretty sure that the other pitches are not going to be as batting friendly as Wankhede. No pitch in India is as batting friendly as Wankhede. Maybe the Chinnaswamy, but apart from that, I don't think any other pitch is going to suit batting that much. So when we go to those slightly bowler friendly surfaces, it'll be interesting to see how the team adapts. And I think definitely the team will find a way to cope with that as well.
Yeah, definitely. As I mentioned, probably you need someone, an extra spinner's inclusion at the moment because Jadeja and Moeen Ali are being used as spinners at the moment. But when you go to actual grounds where spin assistance is there, I mean, for example, if they go to Delhi next, and that's somewhere where someone like Imran Tahir probably comes into the equation in terms of the level. Prasan, talking to you, I want to specifically talk about Navdeep Saini. How surprised were you that he hasn't started the season? He's not been given an opportunity so far. I personally thought he'd come in for the Mumbai leg at least because of the extra pace he has. Do you think he's got any chance starting tomorrow ahead of Kane Dixon, who's probably not done too well? And even Kane Dixon is not your gun death bowler or gun bowler as such, right? But Navdeep Saini has shown glimpses and promise before. How surprised have you been over the fact that Saini's not been given an opportunity so far? And do you expect him to come into play sometime soon?
I think it was a conscious decision taken because Chennai obviously wasn't going to assist Pacers too much, and we did have like a quick in Kyle Jamieson. Obviously, he was paid the big bucks, so he had to play in some sense. And of course, he has impressed in bursts. I think he's looked pretty decent. It was certainly a surprise because obviously Navdeep Saini, international quality, he's played for India, so you expect him to sort of fit into your 11 right away. But I think these are some of the bold decisions that franchisees have taken. To put CSK also into picture, I think getting Moeen Ali to bat ahead of Suresh Raina, who's batted at number 3 forever in the IPL, I think was a bold decision. And in the similar sense, I think RCB have trusted Harshal Patel because if you have both Navdeep Saini and Mohammad Siraj, they haven't really done much in the depth in terms of IPL history. So they took a bold decision to play Harshal Patel ahead of Navdeep Saini, and that's worked wonders. I think. And that's the biggest advantage of having so many players in your side. I think it was a thoughtful trade that to get Harshal Patel in and give him that role of a death bowler. And I think in a similar sense, they are backing him to come good. So I think Navdeep Saini will be warming the benches for some a bit longer. Coming to Kane Richardson, I think he's going to play in the side as long as Daniel Sams is not fit. As soon as Daniel Sams is fit, I have a feeling that Sams is going to walk into the team only because he provides that left arm angle and he can also bat a lot better than what Richardson does. So I think in terms of roles, the roles are assigned in RCB, which is a very fresh perspective from my side because I think for a long time we have had to think of who's going to bat where, who's going to bowl where. But this season we have a proper 11. Players are assigned roles. And I think they won't change the 11 for tomorrow's game, despite it being an afternoon match and the fact that it's going to be played in the Wankhede. But I feel we'll go in with an unchanged 11. And once Daniel Sams is fit, he's going to walk into the side.
Yeah, obviously Sam's recovering from COVID. I don't know if he'll be available for tomorrow's game, but if he is available for tomorrow's game, I won't be surprised to see him play. Yes, I completely agree with because he provides that left arm angle as you mentioned. Because all of RCB's bowlers, especially Siraj, Jamieson, and Kane Richardson, are not quite similar, but the height with which they bowl and kind of offer similar traits in some ways. Someone like Daniel Sams, he can also provide something with the bat because you've got Washington Sundar at 6, Jameson at 7, Harshal at 8. So you might feel that you need a little bit of an extra boost when it comes to the lower order batting. RCB haven't needed that so far because the top order or the middle order have gotten the job done so far. But I'm pretty sure going forward they will believe that they'll need that extra batting option just to provide a little bit of confidence for the top order to play a little more freely. So I think I definitely see Daniel Sams coming into the equation at some point during the season. So Krishna, from a CSK perspective, Dhoni generally does not change 11. I mean, Gaikwad was looking in a very, very poor rut as such because it's not that he wasn't getting scores at all. He just couldn't get back to ball itself in the first 3 games. But obviously, he was wonderful against Kolkata. Apart from that, do you see any changes for CSK? Do you see any reason to make any changes for CSK tomorrow?
I definitely don't see an outright reason to make a change. The change in the previous game itself was a little baffling. They took out Bravo and brought Ngidi in. That too on the back of Bravo providing a wonderful cameo
Almost
towards
cost
the back end of
CSK.
that
Could
innings.
have cost CSK in that game.
And Bravo also bowled well. So MS mentioned that it was because of the rotation policy. They want to give Bravo and Ngidi an equal number of games so that both of them stay fit. Agreed. Both of them have had their injury problems. It's not a major issue to rotate them up front, especially at the start of the tournament. It's necessary that they are rotated a little. Jason Behrendorff is waiting. I don't think he's available for tomorrow, or he could be out for another week or so. So if Jason Behrendorff is not available, then there is no reason to make a change because he's the only one that brings in the left arm angle. And if you want him to bowl with Deepak Chahar up front, maybe that's a good option to use because Kohli does have a slight problem with left arm seamers, the angle. So that is the only matchup I think Dhoni would probably want to play. I don't believe in copying Rajasthan Royals and trying to play Shreyas Gopal like leg spinner. We don't have a good leg spinner now. Tahir is probably the option, but I don't see Tahir playing in at the Wankhede. That's a loss. I would rather back Ngidi to bowl backup length and try to bounce players out. But of course, Kohli is beyond that. I think the most worrying sign for CSK is Kohli's in form now. That 75 looked a classy Kohli innings. He started off slowly, gave a lot of the impetus to Padikkal. Padikkal played well, and then suddenly from nowhere he accelerated and ended up 75 not out. That's just what Kohli can do. And I think that the trickiest part for Chennai is going to be how to dislodge that opening pair. and I won't be surprised if MS wins the toss. I think the captain winning the toss would definitely want to chase, but I think more so if MS wins the toss, I think if RCB bat first, we can probably try to expose a weakness because RCB have not batted first as much. They won a lot of games chasing, and just that one 200 against KKR, and CSK haven't chased also. So it'll be interesting to see how the match goes on that perspective. But yes, if RCB bat first, then that will be a challenge for them. CSK, if they bat first, they have the template ready. They know what to do. They look to attack in the power play, and through the middle overs, they'll come strong and try to finish well. But whoever bats first has to get 200 because both batting lineups are equally strong. Both batting lineups are in form, and yeah, it's going to be a crackerjack of a game. I think that is the game that concludes the Wankhede leg, is it?
It
If that's the
does.
game that concludes the Wankhede leg, then I think it's a wonderful finish to the Wankhede
Proper
leg.
top of the table class to finish the Wankhede leg, as you mentioned. Yeah, but yeah, in terms of CSK's batting, as you mentioned, I think if they bat first, they've kind of got a template, but they still need to be wary of trying to get to 200 because even if you end up 10-15 runs short on Wankhede, you'll get exposed very, very badly. But tomorrow, one positive is they're not going to be due at all affecting either of the teams. So you can say that it's not very lopsided for the team chasing, but you still always have an advantage chasing at Wankhede because you know what you're going to chase, and accordingly you can pace your innings. And as you mentioned, RCB's top order have done brilliantly. That's one positive for RCB is that every single one of the main four players, Virat, Devdutt, AB, Maxwell, all of them have got starts, have played multiple good innings also. So their batting looks in core, but if CSK can pick up few early wickets, then you may be able to put a little bit of pressure on RCB. And conversely for RCB also, if you can dislodge the opening partnership, you wonder how positive CSK will be because whether they'll be going out with this intent, whether they can continue that intent, especially like someone against Yuzvendra Chahal in the middle over. So there's a lot of interesting things to look forward to tomorrow. So finally, before we wrap up this particular segment of the show, I want predictions. So first, going out to Prasen, CSK RCB top of the table clash. Can RCB make it 5 out of 5, or what do you make of it? What are your predictions?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very tight clash, first of all, because obviously Moeen Ali is going to look to take revenge against RCB for all the lack of match practice that he got at RCB. But I mean, to be honest, I think both sides are looking very good. I was a little skeptical of how CSK would do considering how they were last season. But I think Moeen Ali's inclusion in that 11 has really beefed up their chances of sort of making that push for the playoff spot. But I think particularly about tomorrow's match, I have a feeling RCB are slightly better in terms of matchups. A lot of bowling options. The bowling also is looking pretty decent. The batting, obviously, everyone's got starts and everyone's put their hand up and performed in different matches. So I think in terms of matchups, RCBs have a slight advantage, and I feel RCB might get the wood over CSK tomorrow.
And going out to you, Krishna, what do you make of it? Can CSK pip RCB and get to 4 wins as well, or do you see RCB continuing their winning streak?
I think CSK might just pip RCB in terms of the matchups. Like I know that Present mentioned about the matchups, but when I say matchups, I'm probably alluding to the fact that Jadeja and Moeen Ali, given that it's going to be a day game, might get some more purchase out of that track.
Could be a
I
little
think,
drier, yeah.
yeah, it could be a little drier. And Yuzvendra Chahal has unfortunately not been in that great a form. In Chennai itself, he was. In Chennai, of course, he had due. He had many other issues troubling him. But I think given and I think Jadeja and Moeen Ali triggered the RR collapse as well. So given that they've had a slightly better run and given that it's probably going to be a drier wicket in the evening game, I think it is going to be the battle of the spinners, Chahal and Sundar against Jadeja and Moeen Ali. It's not just about containing the runs in the middle overs, but also about taking wickets. And given that Jadeja would be bowling to the likes of Glenn Maxwell and AB de Villiers in the middle overs, if that matchup, if Jadeja can do slightly better than those two freaks, I think that will probably settle the game for CSK. So yeah, I'm picking CSK purely based on this fact. I think this is one in part of the game that has not gotten a lot of attention in Wankhede games. And given that it's the last game and it's a day game, I think this might just help CSK come on top.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, if there is ever a point where spinners do come into play, it's probably towards the end in the Wankhede leg. And as you mentioned, spinners definitely will have a role to play tomorrow. in terms for me, from a neutral perspective, I actually think RCB can go on and make it 5 out of 5 simply because of the AB de Villiers factor. I think the AB factor is almost undeniable, and anyone knows. I mean, if he's able to pull it off at Chennai, I think, especially if RCB chase tomorrow, I think the AB factor is going to play a huge role. And just because RCB have AB tomorrow, I think RCB will pip CSK, but it's going to be a cracker of a game, as you mentioned, because two teams are built very similarly also in terms of having lots of batting and bowling options. Top order looking very strong on both sides, but simply because RCB have AB, I'm just backing RCB in that game. So over to the other teams now. We've obviously discussed about CSK and RCB in length. They're the other teams. So let's start off with the Delhi Capitals now. So Prasen, Delhi also have 3 wins and 1 loss in their first 4 games. How do you make of Delhi under Rishabh Pant, obviously new captain this season, and how do you make of their performance? Because they've probably not been at their very best, but they've still managed to win 3 games. So that's a definite positive for the runners-up from last season, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest positive is obviously Shikhar Dhawan's form. Just when a World Cup or some ICC tournaments around, Dhawan finds a way to get back into form. And I think with the orange cap on his head, I think that's the biggest advantage. Obviously, the lower middle order hasn't got a lot of batting, but that's purely down to the fact that Dhawan's done fantastically well for them. And I think to some extent, I'll even go out on a limb and say they aren't missing Shreyas Iyer. Rishabh Pant's been a little, I feel he's been a little skeptical with his bowling changes. I'm not sure. In one match, he didn't finish Ashwin's quotas of overs. He even bowled Tom Curran at the red. So a couple of captaincy issues here and there, but he's got a lot of support, and I think that's his biggest advantage. On the contrary, when we talk about Sanju Samson at the Royals, he's got almost no one for support. So when we get to the Royals, we'll discuss that. But I think Pant as a captain is a very exciting proposition for the whole tournament and not just where they've been so far. And I think Prithvi Shaw's hasn't really. He's not looked great, it's again back to the old Prithvi Shaw where he's getting squared up, where he's playing too many rash shots, and his form is withering by the game. But I think he'll need to get back into form, and I think that'll be the biggest concern. That fluke bit of Steve Smith has forced them to play him. He isn't the most convincing of T20 players, in my opinion. And with Rahane on the bench, I really feel they probably bench Steve Smith and play someone like Marcus Stoinis up the order because he's really being wasted. Or even if they play Rishabh Pant at 3, play Stoinis at 4, something. But just get Steve Smith off that Delhi Capitals T20, lineup. So, and I'm waiting for Andrik Nokia to come back in. I don't think Chris Wokes is as good as Andrik Nokia is. So once Nokia comes in, I think it's going to be a formidable lineup. But they've started fabulously well, and I think they're definitely going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. I think the fact that Nokia hasn't got a game so far is slightly concerning from a Delhi fan perspective because he was so good along with Rabada, and you could argue that Rabada hasn't been at his best. Probably someone having like Nokia along with him will be a huge boost. I think they have to find a way to get him in. As you mentioned, Steve Smith, the only way he can provide value is probably in the Chennai. Like, and tomorrow is obviously the last game in Chennai, and if Steve Smith cannot do something tomorrow, I genuinely do not see the point in playing him. I completely agree. I think Hetmeyer should be back. I personally believe Hetmeyer is a very exciting talent. If you give him a role at number 3, saying go and be the aggressor, like somewhat like what Maxwell is for the RCB team. So in that way, if you give him that aggressive role, I think they want to hold back Pant and Stoinis simply because they lack a little bit of experience in the lower middle order. They've got Lalit Yadav, who's done decently, but obviously he doesn't have the experience at the highest level. So I think they want to hold back Stoinis and Pant simply because they want to. I mean, for example, the game against Mumbai, it got a little tight, but Pant, Hetmeyer, Stoinis, all of them just got them over the line. So I think in that way, I think that's simply why they're holding back those guys. And as you mentioned, bowling, I think they have to try to find a way. Nokia, I know Oaks has done pretty well with the new ball, especially has been outstanding with the new ball. In fact, but Nokia is just different class, and the pace he provides, and the fact that we're playing in the IPL, I think that extra pace always helps because if you've got someone who bowls 150, not many batsmen, apart from a couple of world-class batsmen, find it easy. So in that way, I think Nokia does have to come into the lineup. Krishna, going over to you, they've got the game against SRS tomorrow. What do you make of tomorrow's game, and do you think Delhi can also go to close to the top of the table? Because if they do win tomorrow, they'll have 8 points in 5 games.
I think it's a night game tomorrow in Chennai, and I think the weather today was again gloomy. So in that case, if it just tends to cool, yeah, there won't be any dew if it's gloomy from say. Yeah, maybe, but maybe in the evening 3 to 6. Yesterday, I think in the Mumbai game 3 to 6 there was overcast conditions here, and that ultimately made sure that the dew was minimal or negligible. I think if that situation prevails, it'll be good because both teams have good spinners, and definitely in Chennai, spinners are key to winning games. So I think whichever team bowls second should not have that disadvantage of bowling with the wet ball. Both teams have great spinners. Don't get me wrong. Ashwin in the Delhi Capitals and Rashid Khan, the probably the best spinner in the contemporary era for Sunrisers Hyderabad. It's actually going to be an interesting battle because both teams are top heavy. As Prasan mentioned, Delhi Capitals have had their top order bail them out on all occasions this game. And the one game that they lost was actually because wickets fell up front and the lower order couldn't capitalize. I wouldn't say couldn't capitalize; they still made a meal out of the situation and made sure that it was 140 or 150 at the end of it. But again, at Wankhede, it was never going to be enough. All that Rajasthan Royals needed was one innings, and that came from David Miller, and Morris made sure that the finishing was proper. So that is a template that even SRH will look to follow. Maybe spin up front against Dhawan and Prithvi Shaw will be an interesting option. I think SRH might use that as well. But apart from that, yeah, I think there's nothing much to separate the two batting lineups. Both are top heavy with a very slim middle order. Maybe Delhi's middle order is better because they have Marcus Stoinis, and Stoinis has had one good innings in this season so far. That came in the last game at Wankhede. So apart from that, nothing much to separate them. Both are decent bowling sides, but SRH of course have been heavily dented by the loss of Natarajan. There's also some injury concerns for Bhuvi. We're not sure if Bhuvneshwar Kumar is fit for tomorrow. So it'll be an interesting battle. And I think SRH need to win this game because people thought with 5 games in Chennai for SRH, they actually thought SRH would actually have a better position in the table before the tournament started, but they're actually now fighting for the bottom place with Rajasthan Royals. So they definitely need to win this game against Delhi. And I think if SRH win this game, it'll definitely make the other two spots vacant because close to 4 to 5 teams will be in contention should SRH win this game. So yeah, I think SRH winning the game is important for the tournament becoming interesting. But if Delhi win this game, then I think it's getting very tougher and tougher for SRH.
Yeah, I think I agree with your point about SRS. I personally thought that they will do much better than what they have in the Chennai, like because their team is kind of structured to be in that way. They've got top order guys who are very experienced and can take the game deep. And you look at the bowling lineup as well. You've got guys like Rashid Khan and Bhuvneshwar Kumar and Natarajan when he was fit as well. Guys who you'd expect to take advantage of these wickets in Chennai, but they've not just managed to put out performances. For example, the game against Kolkata and Mumbai, they were games were almost there, but the finishing touch simply wasn't there, and that's where they lost the game. So I think SRH will be looking to win tomorrow. I think it's a big game for them, as you mentioned. They got to win against Punjab, but overall, I think SRH have a few concerns. But as Prasan mentioned, I think Delhi looked wonderful. I think even despite the absence of Shreyas Iyer, I think they've done really well, and I think they're looking really, really good for the playoffs itself. So I think I personally think Delhi will win tomorrow. So we'll have to just wait and see. Now talking about the next team, we'll be talking about Kolkata Knight Riders first. Kolkata. I mean, what can you say? I think the last 3 seasons, I think it's been a very similar story. Every season before the start of the season, you look at their team and you're like, wow, they've got almost all bases covered. Top order looks very solid. You've got very exciting Indian players. Middle order, you can arguably say on paper at least the best middle order: Russell, Morgan, Dinesh Karthik. And then bowlers also, you've got the experience of Pat Cummins. You've got someone like Sunil Narayan. You've got Nagar Koti, Mavi, Prasidh Krishna. You can almost say that there's not much you can do to improve that first round. That's precisely why they probably did not go all out in the auction either. They didn't really make any big buys in the auction because you can't say. It's very difficult to upgrade what they have in terms of their starting 11. But quite simply, things are just not working for them again. I mean, this cycle post 2018 auction, they barely managed to make the playoffs in 2018, 19 and 20. They missed out on the playoffs. I mean, start of the 21 season, you can say there have been some glimpses of positivity. After the first game, things were looking really good. You wondered whether KKR finally found the groove, but they've gone and lost 3 games, and today they're playing the Rajasthan Royals. So, Prasan, coming over to you, what do you think is going wrong for KKR? I mean, they just look completely out of sorts, and somehow things. I know they got close against CSK. Don't get me wrong at all, but that was purely due to a freak show from Russell, DK, and Cummins because they had no business playing in that game. After 30 for 5, they had no business getting to where they did. So, what do you think is really going wrong with KKR? Because you can't even see that they have a weak team or they have a team with very, very with many holes and different issues. So, what do you think is going wrong with KKR?
I think first of all, the captain not scoring runs and even being in the team is the whole issue. Because I've never been a fan of Ian Morgan in the IPL. I can't remember a single innings that Ian Morgan's played of substance. I do get the fact that he's the England captain. He's very revered in the international circuit, but that doesn't count for anything in the IPL. If you have a player in the side who just can't buy a run, you just don't keep him in the side. And they sacked Dinesh Karthik for Ian Morgan, and now they're gonna look at that option again. But obviously they can't do it because they're gonna come under media slack. So that whole KKR management is in a turmoil of what to do. And if they hand over the captaincy, they'll have to hand over it to someone like Shubman Gill, who's probably not ready. Pat Cummins doesn't want to captain the side, so they can't give it to anyone. Russell is not fit half the time. Sunil Narayan just made the 11. Rahul Tripathi, Nitish Rana are uncapped. So who are they going to give it to? They can't give it to Prasidh Krishna. So they're stuck at a place where they absolutely have no bridge to cross. So they're stuck at like a waterfront, and they're just staring into the horizon, and they're like, okay,
There's
what do
nothing
we
in
do
front,
now?
there's nothing behind, there's nothing on the
Absolutely nothing. KKR have nothing to do. But having said that, I think a few positives for them is Shubman Gill's intent. The only problem with Gill is that he's throwing his wickets away far too often. He tried to slog sweep Rashid Khan. I think after he hit a six of Rahul Chahar, he immediately tried to hit another shot, and he top edged one.
In the
And I
RCB, he's
think,
looking very good.
yeah, he was looking good, but again, like he threw his wicket away. Nitish Rana scoring runs for them is again good. Rahul Tripathi's intent is good. I think the intent overall is a very, very big positive for KKR. And I feel personally for me, the biggest positive is the way Russell batted last game. And I'll tell you why, because they need Russell in form. They might get wickets from Russell, but he'll be expensive. But let's not forget, Kolkata are playing 5 matches in Bangalore. Their last 5 games are in Bangalore. And if they get Russell in form, then you can expect a couple of balls. I mean, I can expect to go fetch a couple of balls in Cubbon Park or anywhere on MG Road. So I think it's going to be very important for Russell to maintain this form, because class players like him just need one innings. Obviously, he had a horrible 2020 season. He came into the season, he couldn't buy a run. He looked like someone. I mean, he looked like a school kid in front of those Mumbai Indians bowlers. Just couldn't hit Kunal Pandya anywhere. But him scoring those runs, and Dinesh Karthik and Pat Cummins coming out of syllabus with that knock that he scored, I think that's a great positive for them. But they'll have to maintain this momentum. So I feel the biggest problem for them is they'll need to find an alternative for Ian Morgan, or they'll need to sit him down and tell him that you need to score runs. And I think they'll need Prasidh Krishna to be a little bit more economical. He might be picking wickets, but he's leaking way too many runs. So I think these are the two biggest issues for them.
Yeah, I think talking about Prasidh, I know he made his India debut and he's actually very impressive in those India games. But I actually think Shivamavi actually did a really good job for them last season. Even in the death, he bowled a couple of times. DK trusted him in the death and he actually pulled it off. So I personally believe Shivamavi could potentially be given a go. Because Prasidh, I know, as you mentioned, he got wickets, but he's a guy who bowls length too far often, and when you bowl in the death, it's very predictable. At the pace he bowls, someone like Wankhede, it's very easy to hit. I mean, for example, if he bowls against Butler today, Butler is going to take him to the cleaners. So that's something he's got to look for. I mean, our KKR have to look into, and as you mentioned, Morgan's a big factor. I mean, Morgan's he's a very good player for England as well. But as you mentioned, in the IPL, he's never had a great season. You can't even think of a great performance from Morgan with the bat. Like one single individual performance where you can say, wow, what a performance. So I think Morgan's form, even for the team, they need a little bit from the captain as well, because I think they're looking a little clueless in terms of what they're trying to do with the ball. Also, they're not picking up early wickets. So I think it's a bit of a hard place for KKR, but as we all mentioned, KKR have the quality. It's just about getting those few pieces together, and potentially KKR can do a lot better than what they've done so far. Krishna, coming out to you, do you think KKR can do something today? Today's game is against Rajasthan. Before we talk about Rajasthan first, KKR, what do you make of their issues so far?
Prasan covered everything. I think he touched upon the fact that Morgan's poor performance with the bat is actually affecting the team, and maybe even his captaincy, because some of the bowling changes he's made has been slightly questionable. I mean, what's the point in bowling an off spinner in the penultimate over to AB de Villiers? I mean, who does that? You got to have some amount of you got to have some amount of cricketing logic to not do that. That's a school kid mistake. I mean, I think the entire thing, and what's the point in using Russell for 2 hours at the back trying to bowl that wide Yorker line? I mean, Russell's actually a better bowler than that. You don't have to tell him that, okay, this is the only plan you got to bowl. He's got his own variations. Yeah, he can think on his own. He definitely has a menacing bouncer. Let me get that right. He has a menacing bouncer. He has a good toe crusher. He's got the deliveries up his arsenal. It's just that KK are trying to KK are trying to make him bowl into a plan. That's not going to work. He'll just kind of, I think he bowled a lot of wides in that CSK game as well in that last over when he was trying to achieve that wide Yorker line. So I think they probably have to give Russell an enhanced role. I think in games where you think this situation is good, and maybe if Russell comes in and if he gets some runs, if that situation is actually going to get better for KKR, they should take it. There've definitely been a couple of games where they've underused Russell with the bat and with the ball. So I think in that sense, the way they are using Russell has to change. And I think if anything, the CSK game told KKR that Russell is the guy who's going to win games for KKR. I think that was made clear. That was made very clear. What was Morgan trying to achieve by coming in at number 4? Is he doubtful of that lower middle order? That question is also solved now. Russell got a good 50, DK got a counter-attacking 40, Pat Cummins batted superbly. So I think even that doubt is now cleared for Morgan. He has his 5, 6, and 7 in good form, so he can just go in at 4 and play. He can play his shots. So I think Morgan has to play with a free license in the next 2 games. Come out at 4. I have no problem in Morgan coming in at 4. He should play at 4. But when you come out, don't just try to defend or don't just go into a shell. Start attacking, because if you're coming in at 4, then obviously you've lost 2 to 3 wickets early, and in that case, Morgan should look to attack. I think the approach from Morgan has to change. As Prasan pointed out, the approach from the top 3 Indians, Gill, Rana, and Tripathi, has been excellent. I think they've been a revelation. They've actually won a couple of games with the bat already. That's the kind of performance they put in. Maybe not Gill, but definitely Rana and Tripathi in that first game were really good against I think SRH. So I think in that sense, the top 3 are doing well. 5, 6, 7 have had a good match against the CSK. So the only problem is Owen Morgan. And I think with respect to their bowling, um, they used Harbhajan well, except for that 19th over to AB de Villiers. I think Harbhajan was well used in that Chennai leg of games. And apart from that, Pat Cummins, well, he's trying to bowl, man. I mean, IPL is not being considerate to his stature.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's
Cummins, the
trying his
batsman,
best.
is arguably having more impact than Cummins, the bowler. Even last season, he had a couple of really good innings, and as you mentioned, they're not using Cummins exclusively at the death over. That's something they've changed. Last season, they backed him in the death, but this season, they're trying to finish his overs off, but it just is not working out. One thing I really wanted to think was against the game is the RCB. They sent Shakib and DK and Morgan ahead of Russell when they were chasing already 13. What did they expect Russell to come off and pull a 19-run over chase when the 5 or 6 over there? I think it's ridiculous. They have to give Russell, the batsman, more responsibility, and it's not like he's probably the best T20 batsman on his game. So as you mentioned, I think KKR have to make a few decisions which are more sane, and hopefully things
I
get
think
better.
if I can chime in, possibly the worst captaincy decision I've seen in this whole IPL is removing Chakravarti after that 2 wickets in that over. I think if he had bowled to Maxwell probably would have tried to hit him or play him out, and KKR would have at least had like a solid foundation. And he messed it up completely by taking Chakravarti out of the attack.
Exactly. I mean, Maxwell is not someone you could say is a world-class player of spin either. It's a bit of a hit and miss. I mean, Maxwell could have tried to take Chakravarti down, and who knows if they got Maxwell, that game was almost done there. If RCB had 10 for 3 or 15 for 3, you've got AB walking in the power play. Never the greatest batsman in the power play. He's got issues against spin, but as you mentioned, they've kind of made a lot of questionable decisions, and that's probably why they are in the position they are right now. Next, talking about the defending champions. I mean, 5 games in, 2 wins, 3 losses. I mean, I'm pretty sure every single fan is very happy, except for the Mumbai Indians fan, I'm pretty sure. But every other fan from the 7 teams, very happy to see very happy to see the way Mumbai are playing. I think it was fair to say that not everyone expected Mumbai to struggle a little bit in Chennai, because it's pretty much against the way they want to play. They can't use their fast bowlers to attack. They can't use their power hitters like Hardik, Krunal, Pollard. Even Ishan, Kishan, Surya, all of them are wonderful players of pace, but wickets are slightly challenging in terms of spin being a major factor. They've definitely struggled. So Mumbai Indians, I mean, Prasan, coming over to you, how happy have you been to see Mumbai struggling this much? Because you could argue they could have very easily been 5-0 at the moment. I mean, the game against KKR was incredible, the way KKR did not win that game. And the game against SRH also, I mean, if SRH had a little bit of quality towards the back end, SRH also could have pulled it off against Mumbai. So how much of a problem has the Chennai has been for Mumbai? And they're going to Delhi also, and the wicket traditionally in Delhi isn't necessarily favorable to Mumbai either. So do you think they've got serious issues going into the next 4 games in the next leg?
Yeah, I mean, more than happy. I think I'm pleased with the fact that most of us who follow cricket realized that Chennai was going to be the Achilles heel for Mumbai, and that's exactly what's happened. Obviously, they aren't the best players at spin, but I think the biggest issue for Mumbai is that Quinton de Kock hasn't scored runs at the top of the order, as well as Hardik Pandya. I think he's barely scored like 40 runs in 5 games. So I think that's the biggest issue for them. For a long time, they've depended on that firepower of Pollard and Hardik Pandya to get them quite a few runs towards the death. But with Hardik Pandya struggling, that just means that a lot of the onus has pretty much fallen on Krunal Pandya. He hasn't been able to score, and that's why they've barely put up scores of even 150. I think 152 is the highest score, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, something around that. So I think that's the problem with the Mumbai Indians, that they absolutely haven't found anyone to score runs for them. Ishan Kishan played a good test match knock yesterday against Punjab. So I think they have quite a few issues. They obviously aren't able to play spin. That was always going to be their Achilles heel. And I think going to Delhi, it's going to be a big challenge for them again, because obviously Delhi is known to be a dust bowl, but we're not sure how the pitches are going to be this season. But if we are to go by what happened the previous seasons, we're definitely going to see the ball spin a fair bit. And I've got a feeling that they need to find a way to get Quinton de Kock to score runs. If he manages to score runs, I have a feeling that it'll give someone like Surya Kumar Yadav or Ishan Kishan the license to sort of come low down the order and go for their shots, rather than trying to play out the spin and try something exorbitant to sort of get the runs. Even in the last match, Surya tried that reverse sweep, obviously top edged the ball and got out against Punjab. So I think they have a fair few issues on that front. They'll need Quinton and Hardik to score runs.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like they've not got an approach set. I mean, the first couple of games, what they decided was go hard in the power play, and it actually worked for them. They were 45-50 for no loss in the power play, and it was towards the back end where they completely lost the plot. And in the games after that, for example, yesterday, you've got Deepak Hooda and Moses Henry. I mean, all due respect to them, okay, but you cannot play out 5 overs of them and be 20 for 1 at the end of power play. And it was clearly seen that overs 15 to 20 are anyway going to be very difficult to bat in. The fact that they allowed Punjab to bowl 2 part-timers, let's be honest, 2 part-timers, 5 overs without any pressure at all, was incredible. I mean, as you mentioned, Rohit and Quinton de Kock. Rohit was very good. He played a solid innings, but he completely messed up the power play. They had a big opportunity to put pressure on Punjab because they were not confident either coming into yesterday's game. So Mumbai got a huge issue in terms of their approach itself, because even going to Delhi, they bat first again in Delhi. What is their approach? Are they going to attack in the power play? Are they going to be wary of the fact that their lower middle order has not performed so far? They've got a few things to worry about. I mean, I know the bowling lineup is pretty much won them the 2 games, especially the game against SRS in Kolkata. Bumrah won single-handedly, being the superstar he is. He did the stuff with the ball, but they've got huge issues with the bat, especially, and the Delhi leg is not going to be easy either. And there are some questions over Mumbai. I think this is not going to be a very easy season for them. I mean, let's be honest, they're still the best team. There's no question about that. But in these conditions, how are they going to tackle them, and how are they going to find an approach to make it work for Mumbai? Because if they don't win games in the Delhi leg, if they don't win at least 3 games in the Delhi leg, I think you could see something very, very incredible happen. I don't want to say it yet. I don't want to tempt fate, but we know what could potentially happen. Krishna, coming over to you, Mumbai Indians, a couple of words just on the fact that the batting has simply not gotten going. What do you think gone wrong with Hardik in specific, Hardik and Pollard? Because those two have been the linchpins, as Prasen mentioned. Many a time he makes a pass, they get to a pass score, but last couple of overs, Hardik and Pollard make sure that they go 20 above par, and the bowling attack they have, they can defend that. So what do you think has gone wrong with Hardik and Pollard in specific?
I think the ordering of Hardik and Pollard has been an issue. I think we've seen this actually. If you cast your minds back to the Delhi game, Amit Mishra just got the wicket of Rohit Sharma, and he was bowling well. At that time, was it the right move to send in an out of form Hardik? Yes, Hardik can take on leg spin, but you have to understand that the pitch was turning. Amit Mishra was getting some assistance, and all he had to do was just tempt Pandya's ego, and he just threw his wicket away and went. And especially at the 12-over mark, given they had lost Pandya, Pollard had to come in and take the game deep, and that is something that Pollard doesn't do. He's a free stroke maker. Yes, he starts slow against spin, but by the time he comes, he is able to assess the conditions and at least rotate strike and start attacking from the 16th over. Yesterday, I think they sent Pollard when the over count was about 16 or 17.
17 only. Yeah, that's when Sky got
That's
out.
that's wrong. That's wrong. In that situation, the only argument that maybe Mumbai can make is Pollard is the batsman in form compared to Hardik and Krunal. But even then, at that point, given that there was one pace bowler over left, I would have probably backed Hardik to do well. Sorry, it was a spinner over left, and the ball was not turning much for, I think it was Deepak Huda was bowling that over. The ball wasn't turning much. So at that point, you probably back Hardik to at least smash the remaining 4 balls for 2 sixes. Hardik can do that. So I think the way in which they've ordered the lower middle order is wrong. They're not reading the situation properly. Hopefully in Delhi they can get that right. And as Prasan mentioned, Quinton de Kock is not giving the starts. Everyone thought that the slow nature of the wickets in Chennai was going to be a big drawback for Quinton de Kock, and that has turned out to be true. I think 3 failures. There was just one game where he played deep into the innings, but apart from that, he hasn't performed much. Surya Kumar Yadav has always he's had to do bulk of the work because he's the guy who's linking that misfiring opening partnership of Rohit Sharma and Quinton de Kock. All because Quinton de Kock is not doing well. Rohit Sharma is trying his level best to make sure that he's able to play majority of the innings. But Surya Kumar Yadav is caught in a he's caught in a soup here because he knows that players behind him are not getting the runs. He knows that up top he has to come in early. He'll have to start playing in from the power play. So he's caught in a soup as to whether he should attack or defend. I think that's not good for Surya Kumar Yadav. Surya Kumar Yadav likes the situation to be uh, something in which he can take the risk. He can take the risk whenever needed, and he can play his shots. So I think
Yeah.
it's just tough on Surya Kumar Yadav that he's actually caught in this position.
Yeah, it's quite simply that the approach Mumbai have deciphered so far, they've just not got an approach. They've tried a few different things, but none of it has worked. And Delhi also, they've got to find approach because the wicket are not going to be suddenly very good to bat. So yeah, I think something Mumbai have to look into. Finally, the last couple of teams, we start with the Rajasthan Royals. Sanju Samson, new captain. I mean, things just don't look good. I mean, from the start of the season, Archer ruled out, and then game one, Stokes getting ruled out. You've obviously got Livingston due to personal reasons going back home as well. They've got no options on the bench either. The team looks completely deflated. 4 games into the season, you're wondering whether they are already nailed on for wooden spoon. Prasan, is there any way they can revive the season?
I think the biggest takeaway for me from Sanju Samson is how he affords a smile in every single toss, every single post-match presentation. He comes there and he says, okay, something went wrong, this went wrong, but you can feel the pain inside him that he's not scoring runs. And I think the biggest issue for Rajasthan is not only is Sanju Samson not scoring runs, he doesn't have any support for captaincy. Because let's think about it. If Stokes was available, if Archer was available, then the players could play their roles. Maybe Stokes would have helped Sanju with the captaincy. People might say Josh Butler or David Miller helping Sanju, but let's face it, Josh Butler has had to bear the responsibility of batting through the innings. Obviously, with Sanju not scoring runs, Josh Butler has to score the runs.
Been changed from he was said to be a middle order player, and suddenly game 1, game 2, he's up there opening. I mean, it's just
he's up there. Yeah, Manan Vora is not scoring runs. Obviously Shivam Dubey didn't score until RCB came up. So Rahul Tewatia isn't a bankable player in terms of like building an innings. David Miller obviously barely found a place in the Rajasthan 11 last time, and this season he has to prove his worth to save his career in the IPL. So obviously Sanju Samson doesn't have any support for captaincy. And Chris Morris, I think Kevin Peterson tore into him, and I'm really happy someone brought it up because everyone, Simon Dool, Sunil Gavaskar, everyone's been praising Morris for what he brings to the table. But the man can't make the South African T20 first 11. And I'm not a fan of what Chris Morris does. He produced a magnificent knock against Delhi Capitals, took on Rabada. All that is fantastic. But to pay 16.25, you need to win more than just one match. You need to be a performer with both bat and ball, and Morris hasn't given them that. So I think that's also playing on Sanju Samson's mind. And overall, I think more than KKR, the turmoil is a lot more bigger in the Rajasthan Royals. And I think for starters, for the issues to sort of subside a little, Sanju Samson needs to score runs.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Rajasthan, as you mentioned, I think Morris was obviously bought in as a support bowler for Jofraj. I actually think Morris is a very, very good T20 bowler. I think he's a very good bowler, but he's just not gotten going. His line length has been very poor. And I mean, for example, again, for RCB last season, he came only a little later in the season. He had the injury to deal with in the beginning of the season. But even then, what happens is they've just not... what happened was he was just getting going, and towards the end of the season, he was still very good for RCB. But what happened was, for Morris this season, he's just not gotten going, and he looked completely out of sight. It's almost like he's not played any cricket recently, and with the ball, he's not being the gun he was for RCB last season. So it's a big concern, as you mentioned, with the bat. I mean, Shivam Dubey, he's a decent player, but he cannot be walking in as a number 4 every single game. I personally think they should give someone like Riyan Parag, who looks for me, a much better batsman than Shivam Dube, hold in number 4, because I think he could perform a lot more better than what Shivam Dube has done. And I know Dube got some runs against RCB, but I still think if you give Parag a more prominent role, especially in the absence of an experienced player in the middle order, I think you can get more out of Parag than you can get out of Dube. And as you mentioned, there's just too many issues at the moment. Butler's not gotten going so far. Sanju Samson, after the first innings, hasn't done too much either. And the bowling attack from Shreyas Gopal looks completely out of touch. And the Indian bowler, I know Sakari has been very, very prominent. I mean, in terms of being a very good talent, but in the IPL, okay, you can be a good talent, but for trying to potentially reach the playoffs or even win the title, I think you need a lot more than that. I don't know why they've not played Tyagi yet. I know Unadkat has done well in that one game, but they've got to come back and get Karthik Tyagi, who was very good for them last season, into the team. So there's a lot of issues for Rajasthan. You've got no backups either when it comes to the Forest Club. You've got barely 5 bowlers. Andrew Tye is probably not going to make the team either. So it's a big question mark for Rajasthan heading into the next few games. So Krishna, coming over to you, a quick word on Rajasthan. Do you think they can revive this season in any way, shape or form?
I think the season is over for Rajasthan. I think they just had one problem after the other. That's the problem. Sanju
It's
Samson,
almost
as
like
Prasan mentioned,
cursed.
yeah. I mean, the moment they lose Stokes, they've lost Lime Livingstone to the bio-bubble issue. They lost Stokes without maybe in what the first 5% of the
Last
tournament
year.
they've lost Stokes, and Archer hasn't even come. So I think the moment you take Stokes and Archer out of that Rajasthan Royals lineup, it leaves a gaping hole. Mind you, there are no players in this world who can fill the roles of Stokes and Archer. Very limited. Maybe Archer's role, you can probably say Rabada or Bumrah can come in, but unfortunately they're employed by other teams. And for Stokes, you don't have a replacement. Maybe Hardik Pandya is the closest replacement, but Shivam Dube has got more runs than Hardik Pandya. So I'm not sure how that turns out at the moment. But I think they just have to start trying new options. Manan Vora has misfired for four consecutive games. The opening partnership has not been strong with Josh Butler. What does Sanju Samson do? Does he say, okay, let me take the onus, let me open with Butler, probably bring in Mahipal Lomler in the middle order, and I think that's probably a bold move from Samson, and that I think they will entertain this in this weekend's game. I think we'll probably see Sanju Samson making those tough calls, because you have to score runs in the power play and you have to make sure that you're also scoring them at a good rate. Now, it has not happened for Rajasthan Royals in about 3-4 games now. The Delhi Capitals game, they lost the plot to Chris Wokes, and yeah, the previous game they lost, I think, 2 to 3 wickets up front in the power play. So all of that is not going to work. If your middle order is inexperienced, then you have to make sure that you at least hold your wickets up front and try to attack through the middle overs. They're not doing that as well. So RR have had one approach, and that approach has continuously failed to give dividends for them for 4 games. So I think the time has come for Kumar Sangakkara to say, okay, maybe let's change the approach. Maybe let Butler and Samson open. They are your 2 best batsmen available now, and you give a free license to all the people in 3 to 7. Ask Butler and Samson to play sensibly. Maybe one anchors and the other attacks, and you just make sure that the rest of the people can come in and start playing positively. Shivam
There's
Dube
got
did
to be
well.
something which has to change, because whatever they're doing so far hasn't worked. You have to feel bad for them, because Stokes and Archer are linchpins for them, especially Archer. I mean, you cannot say how impactful a bowler he is. So it's a little unlucky, but at the same time, you've got to say that Rajasthan haven't helped themselves either. Some of the tactical decisions they've made, some of the way the senior players also perform. So it's just a case of them just not getting going so far for Rajasthan. And finally, the last game, Punjab Kings, they got a big win yesterday. They needed to win against Mumbai after the rut they were in. They got that game. They got that win against Rajasthan the first game. So, Prasan, coming over to you, do you think Punjab could potentially make a late run to the playoffs? I know it's still very early in the tournament, but yesterday's win was massive, right? To just keep them in contention. And they've got games in Ahmedabad and Bangalore, which probably will suit them. So,
Yeah, I'm looking forward to what Gale can do, because he's been very below par so far in the tournament. Safe to say, I think yesterday also he sort of tried to audition for a spot in that West Indies Test side, but thankfully he scored more runs later on and sort of got back to his element. But I think they need a lot more from Gale. In some sense, what that might do is give KL Rahul the license to go big at the top. We were promised a more aggressive KL Rahul by Wasim Jafar, but we haven't really seen that transpire. I think Mayank Agarwal's blown a little hot and cold. He scored a very good knock, but he hasn't been consistent. And I think that lower middle order is looking good. Shah Rukh Khan's looking fantastic. Deepak Huda scored runs. Nicholas Puran can't buy a run, but he's been very unlucky. I think he's found the fielders to perfection, that one run out. So I think he's been very unlucky in some sense. I think yesterday's game was very good for them in terms of the bowling unit. Ravi Bishnaw's addition, I think, is very exciting. I feel, in terms of what he brings to the table, he's someone who's very quick off the surface. So he's a lot more tougher to read. So I think his inclusion will work very well for the Punjab Kings. And Mohammad Shami and obviously Arshdeep Singh also, that combination is very exciting. So they've paid the big bucks for Jai Richardson, Riley Meredith, but they've made a bold decision to keep them out. I have a feeling they're somehow going to fit Jai Richardson in that 11, probably at the expense of Fabian Allen. But I have a feeling that they're peaking. They might peak at the right time, but they definitely need to get a lot more out of Chris Gayle at number 3.
Yeah, I think in the Ahmedabad and Bangalore leg, you'll definitely see a foreign fast bowler walk in, because you probably need that extra fast bowler, because they've just gone with Shami and Arshdeep and a little bit of Henriques. That probably won't work. And as you mentioned, either Henriques or Fabian Allen will be sitting out the games in Ahmedabad. You will definitely see one of Riley or Jai Richardson walking in. And as you mentioned, the batting lineup, KL's gotten starts, Mine's also gotten starts, but Gayle and Puran need to get going. I know, as you mentioned, Puran's been incredibly unlucky the way he's gotten hardly 5 or 6 balls to play, or he's found a way to just get out in some way or the other. So in that way, I think Puran will definitely play a role. I'm pretty confident about that. And as you mentioned, if Gayle can get going as well, I think Punjab look okay. I mean, we're not sure whether they'll definitely make the playoffs, but they've definitely got the team in some ways. In terms of balance, I think the balance is pretty decent. So I think it's just what they're trying to get the structure going and somehow go on around, build some momentum, something like what RCB and CSK have managed to. So it'll be interesting to see how they do in the next few games. So Krishna, quick word. We obviously talked about tomorrow's game. We'll quickly talk about today's game and tomorrow's game against SRS Delhi. I just want a quick prediction from you, Krishna. Who is winning today's KKR Rajasthan game, and who's winning tomorrow's SRS Delhi game? Because we obviously spoken about CSK RCB already.
My prediction for the RR KKR game will probably be KKR. I think, as Prasan mentioned earlier in the video, KKR are in a lesser turmoil run compared to Rajasthan Royals. I think that will probably put KKR ahead in this game. And with respect to Delhi SRH, my guess is Delhi Capitals will win that, purely because of the fact that both bowling sides are almost equal. But the pace attack of SRH is very depleted now due to the withdrawal of Natarajan. And whereas Andrik Nokia is ready to come in, I don't think he'll play tomorrow's game. But without Andrik Nokia itself, that attack is really strong. So I think the bowling attack of Delhi outweighs SRH, and I think that will probably help Delhi win the game.
Fair enough. And Prasan, quick predictions on today's game and tomorrow's game.
Yeah, I'm going KKR for today. I think they're in a better mental space than the Rajasthan Royals. So I think KKR, and tomorrow I'm going with the Delhi Capitals as well. I think they're fairly more balanced than SRH. So definitely Delhi, and today KKR.
Fair enough. Even I agree with the fact that KKR will. I think KKR will just do it today. I think Rajasthan looking at very bad shape mentally. I think that's a big factor for Rajasthan Royals. So in that way, I think KKR little more forward in terms of they've got some positives to build on. Whereas Rajasthan, you have to see whether they're in any position to come back from where they are. And tomorrow's game also, I think Delhi is just slightly more stronger than SRH, and I think it'll be a close game, but I think Delhi will pick SRH tomorrow. So thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot to Krishna. Thanks a lot to Prasan, first time show. It's a pleasure having you on today. And guys who have been watching, please like, share, subscribe to the channel. I hope you guys really enjoyed the show. I mean, as you know, the IPL is going on, and we've got a lot of content lined up for all of you. And thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot, Krishna. Thanks a lot, Prasan, and thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Good fun.